Mr. Bagley and members of the board, we do have 3 items for board discussion this evening. Our first item is our book discussion, our book study, and this evening we are scheduled to discuss pages 1 through 98. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bagley.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So we're reading a New York Times bestseller called Switch. It's all about change. And of course, 1 through 98, that's the first 4 chapters, and we had the triggers of I read, I noticed, I wondered.
Yep.
As we've done in the past. Who would like to lead us out in some conversation?
Well,
Mr.
you know I
Napier?
would. Found it interesting. I found a golf part in here on page 36. Talks about a lady who went to Golf Pro because her golf game was off a little. She paid a lot of money, and the only thing you told her was to relax her grip on the club, and that's all it was, to straighten her golf game out. So what I got out of that is sometimes we make things a lot more complicated than they are. Some things are just pretty basic and simple, but you overthink it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Oh, yeah, because I think, wasn't he saying, like, the golf pro didn't say, well, did your father intimidate you when you
Yeah.
were a child? Is this the root cause of your golf swing?
Yeah, and
You know, or
She
whatever.
thought she paid a lot of money just for that instruction, but
Yeah, that was kind of, that was interesting to me, too. When I first picked this up and started reading when he was talking about our emotional side being an elephant and our rational side being its rider, that jumped out to me, and I didn't realize the significance that it would have in the book, and I highlighted that right away, because that was really interesting, because he says, anytime the 6-ton elephant and the rider disagree about which direction to go, the rider's going to lose, because he's completely overmatched. So I didn't realize the whole book was going to revolve around those two, but immediately I was like, well, that makes perfect sense.
If I could interrupt just long
Yeah,
enough to say,
yeah.
to admit that I hadn't picked up on it quite the way I did, and they were referring to it so much, I said, well, I gotta go back and read about the elephant and the rider and make sure I understand this, because it's in every analogy. Please.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're fine. And then, let's see, there was another part where he talks about paralysis by analysis with the writer. And I really related to that. I can't find what page that was, but I really related to that because my husband and I joke that I get paralysis by analysis all the time. Like, even if it's just picking out a paint color for a room, it's going to take me a month to do it, and I'll have different patches and swatches all over the house and different lighting and whatnot, and just to pick a paint color. And my husband's like, just pick one, So yeah, that really stuck out to me too.
One thing, and I highlighted that same area about the rider and the elephant, and I made a note that it's relatable to the end of page 98, where it says, give direction to the rider, both start and finish. Send him a destination postcard, you'll be a third grader soon, or the script, which they talk about both of those throughout. You want to change your healthy habits, buy 1% milk. And you can state all these things, but unless you put action to it, it's not going to happen. So change is part of it. And on the page 3, what looks like a people problem is often a situational problem. I think those tie together because we can look to change unless we implement that. The situation is not going to change unless we change. And it's kind of ironic. I was at a 2-day meeting for work, and we talked about those little changes. 1% change can make a big difference, and honestly, that's what these 4 chapters were about, is making those small adjustments to go to 4.5, right, for next year. But it's that progress all along the way that we've made these small changes that are noticeable and measurable to see that difference later on. So, yeah.
I thought there were a lot of good anecdotal stories throughout the chapters, and the one that stuck out to me maybe the most was the story of the 424 different gloves. And rather than just present some analytical data about how many different gloves they were using and their varying cost, right, we made it emotional. He put 422 different gloves, and there are different price tags on them on the board table for everyone to see, and made it real, right? And I think change can be emotional, so that emotional appeal is certainly a good way to drive change. Now, it doesn't work in every situation, but it certainly worked there. I thought that was good. Excellent story.
Another part I highlighted, almost a paragraph, was on page 93 about the destination postcard, and it talks about the script. You have to back up your destination postcard with a good behavioral script that's a recipe for success, and you don't need to anticipate every turn, and I think we do that a lot. We try to get from here to there, and we try to anticipate everything in between, and it actually says, don't obsess over the middle, worry about the beginning and getting to the end, because the middle is going to change.
Yeah, I would add, I've often thought the food pyramid,
I was just thinking of that too, yeah.
and he brought it up, and, so one story was about affecting change by making it very specific, right? 1% whole milk, right? So you gave them a game plan, you gave them a target, but be healthier, right? Talks about that being very imprecise, and that ambiguity creates a lot of wiggle room for the elephant, right? And makes it easy to rationalize failure. And you have to be, you have to give direction, you have to be specific, right? Otherwise, it's like a New Year's resolution, which they also
Fades
talked
away.
about, right?
I got another one.
Sure.
Page 24, it's whether the switch you seek in your family or your character or organization, you'll get there by making three things happen. You'll direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and shake the path.
Yeah. And it's all part of it, right? Anything else? Anything from anyone else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'll just share two different things that kind of go together, starting on page 4. It says, ultimately, all change of efforts boil down to the same mission. Can you get people to start behaving in a new way? And then it goes on to the next page. For individuals' behavior to change, you've got to influence not only their environment, but their hearts and minds. The problem is this: often the heart and the mind disagree. And that's what this book is about. And then kind of several pages later, page 8, says if you want to change things, you've got to appeal to both. Talks a little bit about the rider and the elephant. If you reach their elephants but not their riders, they'll have passion without direction. In both cases, the flaws can be paralyzing. A reluctant elephant and a wheel-spinning rider can both ensure that nothing changes. But when elephants and riders move together, change can come easily. Not that it's easy to get them to move together, but that's the key, and that's the big takeaway for me from the first 4 chapters. So,
I highlighted that same thing on page 4 and 5.
yeah,
It's heart and mind.
heart and mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? All right, then.
Next up will be February 20th, chapters 5 through 7, pages 101 to 176. February
Okay.
20th, so you got a couple months. Probably some snow days between now and then.
Every day is a snow day.
Not for the rest of us.
One day.
All right, up next, we have a bus purchasing update from Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Begley, members of the board. Just want to take this opportunity to highlight where we are in the bus bidding process. We went out to bid for 8 regular ed buses and 1 special ed bus. I've been working with Mr. Palmer of OSBA, and we have received pricing back from multiple vendors, and it was a very good day. We're still working through the details, but it does seem as though that we're going to be able to increase the number of features on the buses while reducing costs of about $10,000 compared to pricing that we actually paid this past year. One more detail I'd like to highlight is that the lowest responsible bidder, their trade-in value for our buses was quite low, and we were able to select the pricing for the buses to purchase while rejecting their trade-in values. So Mr. Palmer and I are working on some alternative ways to sell our buses to maximize for the district our pricing. So he's been a great partner in that. I'm still working with Mrs. Lee on the final pricing, as well as the question around leasing. We are working on 48, 60-month, and 72-month pricing for you to present to the board. But we will continue to work on that, and then the goal will be to bring that back to you for board discussion in the next meeting, but also hopefully have enough information that we can move forward with approval as well. So overall, just really wanted to highlight, it was really encouraging, the pricing we received, and Jeanette was very pleased with, we put some features out there as options for us, like almost like a wish list, and we were able to capture all of them.
Nice.
And still show some savings. So far, this process has been very good, but just wanted to highlight that is where we are today.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So are these buses you're hoping to get for next school year or the end of this year?
That's a great question. We received 3 different, there's 3 major manufacturers of buses, and we actually received bids from all 3. The lowest responsible bidder was actually the shortest window of time to get us our buses, and yes, they said their projected timeline for us to have buses on site would be the first week of June, which has not been typical. That was very good news as well.
Well, it's all encouraging, and of course, a price reduction and getting more for your dollar is always fun, right?
Yep.
And thank you for bringing up the leasing information. I know we talked about that at the last meeting, about
Absolutely.
getting that information, so thanks for that. And then you mentioned about selling, excuse me, the buses, and I apologize if I missed it, but
That's okay.
we had not done that in the past, if I recall.
That's
They were
correct.
only worth, $2,000, $3,000, if I remember correctly. Is
Yes.
it changing, or is there a different outlet to be able to offer those buses for sale to somebody? Or?
Yeah, there's a lot of options there that I had no idea about. So I've been educated on this. Ohio has some of the most highest standards for their buses, so we actually can sell in 48 states.
Okay.
Because our standards are so high within the state that they meet 48 other state standards, or 47 other state standards. So there are brokers out there that actually will quite possibly purchase to sell in other states. Quite frankly, Florida being one of those, with what they've dealt with recently. So we're trying to explore all those options, because we have quite a few buses, and the feedback from the vendors that actually came out on site to put eyes on to provide us trade-in values gave a lot of positive feedback about the condition and the way we maintain our buses here. It was very encouraging.
Good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
What
Very
about
good.
advertising on buses? Check into that at all?
I did. I talked to Mr. Palmer about that, and unfortunately, that is a no-no within the state of Ohio on buses itself. There's a lot of restrictions about what verbiage can be on the bus. So if you notice, if any bus of any school district, you know how the name is on the side, and it has to be a certain font, certain size, including the numbers on the back of the bus also have designation and purpose. So it's very restricted, but yes, we did engage in that conversation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
awesome.
All right, our third and final item should say items for board discussion this evening. Maybe everyone should get comfortable. We have quite a few board policies to discuss tonight, so I'll turn it over to Mrs. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley and members of the board, I do have 10 pieces of policy for discussion this evening. The language is in your board packet, and it does match what I sent you last Friday for review, so I will try and be brief as we go through them. First up, House Bill 214 requires us to create 2 new policies and revise 2 current policies. So the first new policy is JEDC, Religious Expression Days. We are now required by law to allow students up to 3 excused absences each school year for religious expression days. So per law, we must also create a non-exhaustive list of major religious holidays or festivals for which a religious expression day would not be denied. In addition to the policy and list being on our website, it is also something we'll need to share annually with our parents, which we plan to do via final forms with all of our start of the school year forms that we already do. Along with that then requires some revisions to policy JED, student absences and excuses. That is revised to simply add religious expression days to the excused absence list. And then policy JEDA, truancy, is revised to add that the hours missed due to a religious expression day will not be calculated or counted against any student in regards to truancy hours. And then the fourth policy that was impacted by House Bill 214 is a new policy called ACC, Political Commitments, which basically is stating that we're required by law to have this policy to prohibit requiring any of our employees or applicants for employees, students or applicants for academic admission to make any commitments to political movements or ideologies. We don't do that, but now we officially have a policy in place that matches our current way of doing business in our district. Next up, House Bill 147 requires us to revise 4 of our current policies. Policy IGD, co-curricular and extracurricular activities, revised to reflect absences due to religious expression days will not impact a student ability to participate. But then from the House Bill 147, the revision reflects the new provision that would allow the superintendent to permit a home-educated student, a student enrolled in a non-public community STEM or STEAM school, or a student enrolled in a different district to participate in interscholastic athletics if they were subject to certain conduct or qualifying offenses that are listed in the policy that I sent you. And then policy IGDJ is revised to reflect all of those same changes, but in regards to interscholastic athletics. And then policy JECBC, admission of students from non-chartered or homeschooling, is updated to simply remove the references to the extracurricular activities that are now addressed in the previous 2 policies that I just mentioned to you. Following me here? Okay. And then the final policy from House Bill 147 is policy DM, deposit of public funds, just updated to reflect revisions to cash acceptance and ticket prices, to state that we will not change ticket pricing for cash payments versus other forms of payments with the exception of any processing fees from online platforms or credit cards, and that student ticket prices will be less than our adult ticket prices. And then last but not least, Senate Bill 168 requires us to revise 2 of our current policies, policy IGAE, health education, and policy IGAH/IGAI, family life and sex education. Both of those policies were revised to simply reflect a change in some of our educational terminology that was outdated. So pending any questions or concerns, these pieces of policy will be on our next board agenda for approval.
Just out of curiosity, since we were talking about chronic absences and whatnot, and I think the slide said they don't differentiate between excused and unexcused. I assume that the religious absences don't qualify for a special exception for that chronic absence thing.
That's a great question, and I was sitting here thinking that same thing as you were talking about the chronic absenteeism. While it won't count against them from a truancy standpoint, I would imagine it may count against them still because sick days and other excused absences are counted against the...
I just would hope that the state would sort of relax their chronic absence rule if they're going to, include this possibility for additional absences, so.
Yeah.
There has been legislation introduced in the past couple of years to address some of those things because, even students who are, medically fragile and who are absent more, they all count in that chronic absenteeism number. So it really can make it look much more inflated than it is because so many of these excused absences are truly needed, for the student. So I would think that this probably still counts against chronic absenteeism, just knowing that it's really a catch-all.
Okay, thank you.
Got a letter, or a question on letter H, public funds. Is that, like for football games, students have to be charged less than adults? Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay. Are we allowed to charge for parking at football games?
That's the, charging for parking is not covered under this policy.
So we're allowed to charge for parking?
I would need to do some research on that, which I believe that we currently are in the process of doing some research on that
Okay.
to see.
I know in the
looking-
past we have for like playoff games from other schools.
Right,
So I can add some insight into that. So there is actually a board policy inside of our facility usage policy that prohibits groups 2 and groups 3 from charging for parking. So that is a recent discovery by the district. So we're actually looking into amending that policy in the near future. Checking with Mr. Clemens, making sure, we just want to take the time to go back and look to, is there something in law somewhere that would make that unethical to do that? If not, then we're looking to amend that policy to allow our boosters to.
Well, I know other schools do for these playoff games because the state takes most of the money
Sure,
on
yeah.
the tickets, so the
Absolutely.
school's hosting.
Yeah, yeah, and I can't speak for those other school districts'
Right.
board policy, but I can speak to ours, and it's in there. So right now, it's a violation of board policy. So
Okay.
we're looking to amend that in the future. We've actually already started that process.
Okay.
that concludes.
Thank you, and as always, I know you spend a lot of time digging into this, and appreciate those being sent out prior to the meeting so we can put some eyes on it and try to get some understanding about what they truly mean.
Right.
So, well, thank you for the clarity that you do provide and time put into this. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Probably the best part of your job now, right?
It's the most exciting part of my day, yes.
She gets so excited when she's working on board policy.
I do.
All right.